Hello and welcome in to Off the Bench. It is what, Thursday? Yeah, it's Thursday here. I'm Reed Mouse, and we had two college basketball games last night, both of the local teams on the wrong side of it. We have news regarding a former spark plug for the Cincinnati Bengals trashing a well-respected man. On today's show, we've been teasing it all week. We're going to have Sam Olber from Locked On Cubs coming on at 10:30 to talk about my Cubbies and talk about the NL Central favorite and his thoughts on the Reds and all that good stuff. We'll do that at 10:30. And then we'll do a little buy or sell regarding the NFL coming on. And we also got to talk about the Freddie Peralta trade. The Brewers, once again, trading their best player, their ace, coming off a year where they won almost 100 games and were in the NLCS. And one, how that is also bad for baseball. And two, how they've given themselves a pass because they've done this before and they continue to win. So it's hard to gauge how big of an impact that is. As mentioned, I'm Reed Mouse, as always, joined by Stone Shields. Stone, how are you on this lovely Thursday morning?
Doing good. Happy to be here as always. And yeah, Pacman Jones, he went out and he went on Julian Edelman's podcast and he was ripping your boy. That's your guy.
That is my boy.
That's your guy.
Man, it's how does we oftentimes talk about in this current era of, well, what's the old meme? Not everyone should have a podcast, right? Maybe I shouldn't have a podcast, but not everyone needs a microphone in front of them. How does Pacman Jones keep getting on these shows? I guess I know why. It's because he says stuff like this. But to bash a beloved man like Andy Dalton the way that he did, like just strays too. Just strays. Like why'd you need to go there? Well, we'll get into to all of that relatively later. For those keeping tabs on the crown molding project at the Mouse House, it is half the room looks really good. The other half, it's going to need to be redone. But I hung them yesterday, and we're going to have to redo that. Crown molding, listen, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but there's nothing in recent memory that has made me feel more dumb than having to hang crown molding. Also, shout out to Mrs. Shields for getting my lovely daughter a little present. Shout out to your mom for that one. Yeah. You said she's quite the gift giver. That was very cute, very, very special. Thank you to your mom.
Of course, I'll pass that message along.
Yeah, if you're watching, thank you so much. The clothes are very, very cute. I have mentioned to Stone. I didn't know this before. We're a couple weeks away from having this baby. The amount of clothes you get is actually enamoring. Like, it's a testament of how great people are in the world. Like truly, everyone always wants to talk about how terrible the world is. The world's a good place. It's a wonderful place. And my wife's a hairstylist, so every time she's cutting someone's hair, she comes home with new clothes every single day. And I made the joke, look, as we're putting away all the newborn stuff, I was like, I don't think we'll ever have to wash these clothes. I think you can just slap a new outfit on her every single day, and by the time we run out, she'll be on the new size. She'll be outgrowing the newborn stuff. So I didn't even check to see what size your mom got, but the clothes were very, very cute. So thank you. Listen, not just to her, to everyone that is helping along this way. All right, let's talk about the show. Let's get into the show. We'll start with college hoops. We'll start with the Xavier Musketeers. They go to Omaha, Nebraska, take on Creighton, a team that they lost by 1 billion points at home just not too long ago, a few weeks ago. And before we left the office yesterday, one of the owners here, Chatterbox, Sean Spurlock, looks at me. He's like, Reed, he's a Bearcats fan. He goes, Reed, why wouldn't I take out a second mortgage and put it all on Creighton minus 7.5? Well, that's why. Because what happened yesterday is the Muskies got screwed. They got screwed. And it's hard to get super upset because of where the team is. We understand that the team isn't going to make the tournament. We understand that the team's going to be near the bottom of the Big East, and that's all well and good. But still, it stings a little bit. And it's a reminder of just how good of a job Richard Pitino's doing. You get on Twitter, and national college basketball pundits going like, man, what Pitino's doing with that roster is something to be said. Now, obviously, in those final few seconds, bad foul call, don't get the defensive rebound, and you lose the game. And as we know, the margins, as we've learned with the Bengals, as we've learned with the Reds, and we're learning with the Musketeers, when you don't have the best roster in the world, the margins for winning aren't that great. They're not that great. And that's what fell in the final few seconds, is they were unable to get a rebound. They had a bad call. Creighton out, I think they had three times as many free throws. And, it's the second day in a row we're bringing up Tom on the show, but Tom always had a good point about college basketball, about the home teams. They get more free throws. They get more calls throughout the game. That's why home court advantage is so valuable. For whatever reason, they call it tighter for the road team. And that's certainly what happened at Creighton last night. Now, I will mention this. For all the love that Richard Pitino is getting, and he deserves all the love because he truly is doing a great job with this team, that credit only goes so far when you continue to lose. And we can say it, we can acknowledge that you're doing a good job, but it only goes so far where it's just like, we're running the same wheels over and over again. And they've gotten some wins that they weren't supposed to get. And they'll get some more wins that they weren't supposed to get. Hopefully they'll get one this Saturday against his dad in preventing St. John's and Rick Pitino to get the next milestone. I forget how many wins he's going for. Is it 900 wins? Is it something crazy like that? However big the milestone is, Rick Pitino is going for it against his son this Saturday at the Centos Center, if that game is even played based on the way that the weather is looking out for this weekend. By the way, stay safe. So, shout out to Xavier. They played a good, tough game on the road. Creighton's a tough place and a place that Xavier never seemingly wins at least not in my memory. There might be stats to counteract that. But as I mentioned, I think Richard Pitino's doing a great job. I'm incredibly confident for the job that he will do here at Xavier going forward. But you only get credit for losing so much. You know who else lost last night? Was the University of Cincinnati Bearcats. Everyone wondering how they would respond after beating Iowa State at home over the weekend. The number 2 team in the country. How did they back that up? Facing the number 1 team in the country. Going out to Arizona. Taking on the Wildcats. And what did the Bearcats do? Well, much of what they've done this entire year, they hung in there for about 27 minutes. 1-score game. Few minutes into the second half, and then the wheels fell off. Outscored 37-11 in the final 13 minutes of that game as they get absolutely pounced on by the Wildcats. And does this say anything about this Bearcats team? No, it's more of the same. We know that this roster is talented. We know that they can play with anyone, at least for some period of time. Last night it was 27 minutes. But between Wes Miller and the stat came out about his quad 1 resume throughout his career at UC, and it's not good. And you'll continue to get quad 1 opportunities in the Big 12. But this roster is very good. They're just not well coached. And they might knock off another top high-end team in the Big 12. In fact, I bet that they will. But because of Wes, this team just cannot move forward unless they're going to have to go and get a new coach, as we know. And UC was given a lifeline with the NCAA rule changes to the transfer portal that came out a few weeks prior. So the Cats, they lose to the Cats. Bearcats lose to the Wildcats. Xavier loses to Creighton. Stone, you probably got to check out just a little bit. Like I watched the final 10 minutes of the Xavier-Creighton game. I watched the first 10 minutes of the UC game before I fell asleep. Any takeaways from our 2 local college teams and how they played last night?
That's now a couple losses for Xavier by just 1 point. And, overall to this point, I think Patino's done a tremendous job. But they're, so close to being viewed as, oh, my goodness, what a story for the Xavier Musketeers. But a few games that they've lost by 1 point. Just got to box out, got to get a rebound. It was a great shot by the kid that missed the free throw. But I'm sure that's got to frustrate them. I mean, it's good to respond the way they did after the way things went at home against that very same Creighton team. So to have a competitive game with them, and really I thought controlled much of the second half as well. So that's got to be a heartbreaking loss for them. But again, my stance on that program is I don't know if they're a rocket ship, but they're trending in the right direction. They're going to continue to do that there as well. With UC, I guess it was promising to see them hang in there. That Arizona team is the real deal. They haven't lost a game and they should be the favorite to win the national title. They got a lot of youth. They play 3 freshmen, so we'll see how that correlates when we get to March. But yeah, the fact that they hung in there for as long as they did, I was kind of impressed. But then, typical UC fashion, the shots weren't falling. I don't care who you play. If you score 50 points, you're not going to win. Right, so went cold offensively down the stretch. It was good to see Sean McDermott get some confidence back. He made some shots, but they just don't have enough offense at this point, and that's frustrating. Buck Harris can do some great things defensively in the effort and the hustle, but anytime he's shooting the ball, it's not going in, and it doesn't even look like it's getting close, to be honest with you, either. So lots to clean up. They hung in there for a while. Deserve some credit for that, but if you didn't watch the full game and you just look at it, you're like, well, they got blown out by the best team in the country. And unfortunately, when they've played these top of the line opponents, kind of a reoccurring theme for Wes.
Yeah, I was trying to find a tweet that I saw last night that was awesome, and when it was talking about the Bearcats, and it's like, I'm sorry for paraphrasing this tweet, and I don't know if you guys will ever run a podcast, but you probably shouldn't paraphrase tweets on the show too often. But the joke went as this. UC plays such cohesive, great defensive basketball, and on the other side, they just street ball it up. And it's just like, it is true. Like, when you watch UC, they do play great defense. They do work as a cohesive unit. Then they get on the offensive side of the ball, and you're like, what are they doing? And they played a great team last night. So it doesn't say much about UC, but we'll continue. I still think that they'll get another marquee win this year. You just hope, if you're a UC fan, that they don't do enough to talk themselves into another year of West, because we've seen enough. We've seen enough here in this city. And they should move on. They should go in a new direction. They'll go to Arizona State this Saturday. I assume they'll just stay out there in Arizona. Why would you come back here, especially with the weather coming on up, just to fly back out there? So good luck to the Cats. They'll take on Arizona State this Saturday. Xavier will take on St. John's. Patino versus Patino. I don't even know. Once again, I don't know if that game has – I don't know if they can cancel games. I really don't know how that all works out. But Patino versus Patino this weekend. All right, let's talk about Pacman Jones. He goes on Julian Edelman's podcast and just bashing my boy Andy Dalton. And I've got 2 things to say. One, what a clown. What a clown. I mean, Pacman Jones, he had a good career here in Cincinnati. It was part of the reason that those Bengals teams were as good as they were. Like, truly was a big impact. And was part of the reason that they had the mentality that they had. That defense, that was a hard-hitting defense. Like, they had – we remember the Steelers game where Tez and this whole defense and Pacman are just flying around. And you kind of miss that. It kind of was part of the reason that the AFC North was so awesome to watch at that time. Because between us, between the Steelers, between the Ravens, those were 3 hard-hitting defenses. And let me say this about what Pacman Jones said about Andy Dalton. Call him a clown, because he is. I don't know how he keeps getting microphones to even say these takes. But to be fair to the take, he's not wrong. Like, Andy Dalton was the reason that the Bengals were held back at that time. They had great wide receivers. They had a great offensive line. They had a great defense. Just for whatever reason, Andy Dalton would, in the postseason, not play great. In fact, we showed the stats from Justin Herbert after his postseason performance. The 2 worst quarterbacks in postseason history are Justin Herbert and Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton being the worst. But why, over a decade later, do you need to go out and just bash Andy Dalton, a guy that is so widely respected in the sport, in the city, from how he molded himself as a professional athlete to the charity work he did? There aren't. You won't find them, because there aren't many better in the world of sports than Andy Dalton. A truly tremendous stand-up quarterback, human being, and to over a decade later just be bashing at him on one of the most popular podcasts, it just doesn't sit well. I mean, you could say, we just didn't have the great offense in those postseason games. That's why we couldn't go. But to bash Andy Dalton the way that he did, it's got to rub every Bengals fan the wrong way. And it feels like life is just the time between Pacman Jones saying something stupid on the internet. Stone, your take on this Pacman Jones, Andy Dalton stuff.
Anytime you hear Pacman speak, you kind of just roll your eyes a little bit.
Correct.
Just because of his history and his issues off the field. But to your initial point, like, he's not wrong. Like, it was some of those, like, the fact that you look back at those Bengal teams and they didn't win one playoff game with some of those teams they had. Like, this wasn't like fluky backdooring into the playoffs, had no business being there, a la Pittsburgh Steelers the past few years, right? Like, some of those Bengals teams, yeah, you didn't feel good about them going against Brady and the Patriots or Manning and the Colts or the Broncos, but it's like they should have won one game at some point. And the reason why they didn't was because of Andy Dalton. So I'm with you. He's so far removed from it. Clearly, he doesn't have any allegiance with Andy Dalton. Like, you would never hear A.J. Green go out there and say that because A.J. and Andy were boys. Clearly, Pacman didn't feel that way about Andy. And, he kind of kept going. Like, there was, like, it wasn't just once or twice. He said it, like, Julian kept asking him questions, and he kept going back to, Andy Dalton, that's the reason why. Which, again, is not wrong. But, he's got the right to do that. And some of those games from Andy were really, really bad. But at the end of the day, it's Pacman Jones, right? If that was Andrew Whitworth going out there saying that or A.J. Green, we would be like, whoa. But it's like, it's Pacman. Like, who cares?
Correct. That is a good point. It is the medium is the message. The medium is the message, and the fact that it's coming out of Pacman Jones's mouth, you're just like, it frustrates you, especially a guy like me who loved Andy Dalton. He's one of my favorite. He was my favorite football player until Joe Burrow became a thing, and I defended him tooth and nail. Oftentimes, wrongly so. But when Pacman's doing it, you're just like, whatever, dude. Like, truly, truly, whatever, dude. And it stinks that those things will continue to make their rounds around the internet because, like I said, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in any sport as highly regarded as Andy Dalton. In fact, to testament to the player that he is and the person that he is, the first thing you say is like, seems like a great guy, because you're about to say something bad about the way that he played. And he was He's the barometer here in Cincinnati for what a good quarterback is. I feel like every city has their version of that. A podcaster I listen to is a 49ers fan. He uses it as Jimmy Garoppolo. He's like a Jimmy Garoppolo type, which means like you can win with him. You're going to win a lot of games. Andy Dalton, but you don't make it to 5 consecutive postseasons without being at least a decent quarterback, without being a good quarterback. I bashed C.J. Stroud. He looked completely lost in his 2 postseason games this year. And you can't believe how bad he played. You don't win 3 postseason games your first 3 years in the league, 1 each year, without being a good quarterback. I don't care how poorly you play. I don't care how loaded the team is around. You don't do that without at least being a good quarterback. Andy Dalton was a good quarterback. He had A.J. Green, who's one of the best wide receivers in the league. I mean, Tyler Eifert was great. Like, he had a great offensive line. Andrew Whitworth, Kevin Zeit. Like, it was a stacked team around him, and he probably brought them down some bit. But Andy Dalton was a good quarterback. In fact, I still hold that the 2011 draft, it was 2011? Second best draft in my life. That was the draft that we got A.J. Green, Andy Dalton. The only thing that did better than that was when we got Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Logan Wilson in 2020. But Andy Dalton, just an incredible. He's still playing, right? He's
Carolina's backup.
He's still going to be the backup. So hopefully and that's the reason he's going to be in the league until he doesn't want to play anymore. Like, he will be a backup because when a player like that isn't as talented and he's got to learn. That's the thing. Like, that's why catchers are managers, because they oftentimes are like the best players become not the best players become coaches because they've got to learn. They've got to figure out how to outsmart the system. That's where Andy Dalton is. That's why he'll be a quarterback in this league for probably as long as he wants to be. They'll continue to give him a contract because people like him having in the quarterback room. He's a great guy. He can mold a young quarterback and can teach you how to be a service not just to the team but to the community, all those great things. Andy Dalton, stand-up guy. Pacman Jones, probably not a stand-up guy, not the best guy. Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
Live on air.
Oh, yeah.
That maybe I shouldn't tell the story. When I was in high school, we used to sell programs at Paycor Stadium. It was a fundraiser for our baseball team. And we figured out, because we could park underneath the stadium, that we could sneak out to where the players would meet their family after the games. So we'd get done selling the programs. We got to watch the second half because he stopped selling them at halftime. And we'd sneak out to where the players are. And we got out there, and the first time we ever do that, we sit right next to Andy Dalton's family. And Andy Dalton comes right on out, and we do the Horned Frogs thing, takes pictures. Greatest guy in the world. Pacman Jones comes walking around. I'm not going to tell you what my friend whispered in my ear when Pacman Jones came around at the risk of health. But we said something to Pacman to garner him pulling over and coming over to take pictures, and Pacman Jones just completely blew us off. We got pictures with A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, Geno Atkins, the whole team. Pacman Jones just kept on walking. So Pacman Jones, you're a clown, and maybe you shouldn't be held to the standard of having to take pictures with 15-year-old annoying kids that are sneaking into where they shouldn't be when you're trying to meet with family. But also a fun story about that. A.J. Green, very reserved guy, right? Taking pictures with everyone. Frowned in every single picture that he took, except for when two very attractive young women asked him to take pictures. He took like 5 pictures, took pictures with us, frowned, took a picture with these other fans, frowned, took a picture with the other fans, frowned, took a picture with 2 very attractive young women, smiled. And I was like, yeah, I would do the same thing. good for A.J. Green. All right, let's talk about Freddie Peralta in the final 5 minutes before Sam Ober comes on from Locked On Cubs. Freddie Peralta traded to the New York Mets, the Milwaukee Brewers. After they win 97 games this past season, go to the NLCS, trade away their ace. And we got to be fair on this show. We do got to be fair. Because if we are going to bash the Los Angeles Dodgers, which I have come to that side after defending them, saying, hey, baseball is a random sport. I'm not quite there to say the sport is completely broken, though it's becoming harder and harder to make that argument. You've also got to acknowledge that it's not good for the sport when teams like the Milwaukee Brewers, hot off a 97-win season, in which they go to the NLCS, trade away their ace. And they do get a pass amongst fans because Brewers fans are used to this. They did it with Corbin Burns. They did it with great closing pitchers like Josh Hader and Devin Williams. They didn't re-sign a guy like Willie Adames. Like, they let their stars go, and for the most part, they get a pass because they keep bringing up new talent and they keep figuring out ways to win. Now, there's only so many times before that falls on you and you can't continue to do it. But if we're going to bash the Dodgers for spending more money than everyone, then we've also got to bash the small market teams that are unwilling to keep superstar players. The Brewers are in a window to contend. They are. And you could argue, well, they can't contend with the big dogs, as we saw in the NLCS last year, and maybe you're right. But when they continuously trade away their star players because they can't afford them or don't want to afford them, which part the can't affording goes to these big market teams just being able to spend more. But that's bad too. And it's more of a magnifying glass on the sport. As terrible as we are presuming what the Mets and what the Dodgers and what the Yankees do to this sport, then we've also have to acknowledge that when these small market teams that are in our contending window are trading away their ace after winning 97 games and going to the NLCS, that's bad for ball too. That is. And I can't believe I'm going to say this live on. I do feel bad for Brewers fans because even though they've had a long period of success, the longest period of success that this team has ever seen in their franchise, which dates back to the 1960s. This is their most potent time of winning. And they have become normalized to trading away Josh Hader, to trading away Devin Williams, to trading away Corbin Burns, to trading away Freddie Peralta. It's not good for ball. It just isn't. And I know we've got a guest coming on here in a second, so if he pops on, You can send it back over my way. But Stone, as a Reds fan, I got to know what your opinion is on a team. If we're gonna give the Dodgers crap, which we will, for signing, then we have to also give the Mets crap, or the Brewers crap for trading away their best players.
Yeah. And, unfortunately for the rest of the division, like, it just works for Milwaukee. I feel like at some point their luck is going to run out. But then again, I feel like we've been saying this for 2 or 3 years. So maybe they just know what they're doing from a scouting and drafting and developing perspective. But, yeah, absolutely. They've had studs come in that deserve big-time contracts, and they just get rid of them. But then they keep winning. So if you're a Brewers fan, you can't really be ticked off about it. Now, does that correlate to them not having success in the postseason? Potentially. But it's just fascinating to me that they're able to pull it off and win. And back to the Dodgers thing real quick. I do think, and look, changes need to be made. We all understand that.
There will be.
But, the Mets are doing the same thing, and it's not working. Like, the Dodgers are very well run, too. And I do think it's funny how the Kyle Tucker stuff is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And all you Cubs fans were all ticked off at Kyle Tucker at the end of the year. So it's just kind of funny to me that is like what has enraged everybody. Like, that was the last straw. Dang it, the Dodgers got Kyle Tucker. And granted, he's a really good player and can hit bombs and, play good baseball. But they're also just really well run. Like, the Mets are trying to do the same thing, and it's not working. And it's not even close. And, like, the Yankees are trying to do similar things as well. Obviously, the Dodgers have better rosters than both those teams. But there are other teams that have the ability to do this, and they just can't execute like the Dodgers can. So
yeah, what about the Kyle Tucker deal that comes out that his salary this year? You know what his salary is?
$1 million.
$1 million. Shohei Ohtani's getting $2 million on his salary. Now he got a $64 million signing bonus. So really he's getting $65 million this year. But it is funny that they'll be paying $3 million in salary to Shohei Ohtani and Kyle Tucker this season. Listen, man, baseball's in a weird spot because on one hand, the sport is growing tensions of the likes that we haven't seen since the 90s, since the 94 lockout, probably. Like, it is, and I wasn't around there. I'm only reading. It's only what I know about from fans that were alive at the time and from what I've read. The tensions were very, very high, which caused the lockout. It almost killed baseball. Shout out to steroids for bringing it back in 98. But the tensions were so high, and that's where baseball is right now. The tensions are so high, it feels like a powder keg. Small market teams are so pissed at what the Dodgers are doing, and then you get a billionaire owner, Steve Cohen, that buys the Mets, and it's just a pet project for him. He's just spending money like a madman and telling them, like, hey, they missed out on Kyle Tucker. You got to go get Bo Bichette. All right, now go get Freddie Peralta. Like, they do these moves. Meanwhile, the Brewers, who are a 97-win team, have to trade away because they cannot pay those guys. It's a powder keg where the tensions are at. But also, and worth noting, on the other hand, the sport is growing in popularity. And the reason for that is a few things. It is the changing of the rules. Shout out to Rob Manfred, a guy that gets blasted all the time, but I think he's a pretty good commissioner, if I'm being completely honest. We'll see this. His hardest job thus far is going to be this next year. What happens after the year? But because of the rule changes, the sport is way more consumable. When my wife, who, she knows I love baseball, so she tries to get involved. When she's at the games and going like, man, this is way easier to stay involved in the game because the game's not 3.5 hours. It's 2.25 now. Like, the game is more consumable. The teams that need to win are getting better. It's like college sports in that regard. We always talk about how it's good for college football when Notre Dame and Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia go. Well, it's good for Major League Baseball when the Brewers, the Yankees, the Cubs are good. Like, that's good for baseball in terms of growing the popularity. So it's just a really weird juxtaposition. A really weird juxtaposition that this team, that this sport is at a crossroads because it can really damage itself in the next collective bargaining agreement, where if they have an extended period, it feels like you're just kneecapping all the growth that you had. just kneecapping all the growth that they had. But we will see. We will see where it goes. Do you get a sense of the duality of where baseball's at right now, to where, like, on one hand, people are pissed, right? Yeah. Small markets are noticeably upset every time the Dodgers do something. The sport is broken. The sport is broken. When the Brewers make this move, this is bad for baseball too. But the sport, in terms of how much money it's making, its ratings, it's getting better. So it's at a weird crossroads where, is the sport dying? Is it growing? What do they do? How do they tightrope this? I don't know the question I'm asking, but do you get a sense of this is at a really weird crossroads for baseball going forward?
Yeah, because it'd be one thing if all this was happening and the game was not getting better ratings and there was less and less people. Because, like, 5 years ago, we were talking about, it's kind of dying. Like, yeah, us diehard baseball fans were tapped in. But apart from that, nobody else really is. Well, that's not the case right now. Like, you look at the ratings over the past few years. You look at what the World Series was able to do, even with the Canadian team in there. These ratings are through the roof. So it's like, do we want to make – if you're Major League Baseball, do you want to make these big-time changes if the game is, growing as fast as it is? So, yeah, absolutely. They're at a crossroads. I have no clue how to fix it. Again, it's not just like the Dodgers are just executing at such a high level. And, like, Bo Bichette, if his knee's not messed up and he's able to score in that last game of the World Series, they win. And we're probably not having this conversation here. So I've always been sort of like on the side of, like, we got to fix what the Dodgers are doing. But I also understand, like, there are other teams trying to do it. They're just not as well run as the Dodgers are. And the Dodgers, yeah, they have big pockets, but they're one of the most well-run franchises in all of sports. And, they're proving that, and it's ticking a lot of people off.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt. As we're waiting on Sam Olber from Locked On Cubs to join us, I just sent him a note, so hopefully he hops on. Man, getting stood up by a Cubs fan, that'd be tough.
So I said Eastern time in my email. I'm worried that he wasn't thinking Eastern time.
Yeah, I let him know Eastern time at least 3 different times while messaging him and setting this up. So hopefully he pops on. If not, it's all good. Probably the chat would appreciate not talking about Cubs for 15 to 20 minutes. Instead, we'll talk about baseball and ratings and all this stuff that they also love, that we know they love. I got to ask about the juxtaposition when it comes to why are we, as sports fans, and this is an open question that I don't have the answers to. That's why I'm posing it to Stone. Maybe he'll have some insight here. Why are we so easily ready to talk about that it's good for college football when Michigan's good? It's good for college football when Notre Dame's good. It's good when USC's good and Texas is good. We understand that. Like, if you ask that, is it good for college football when Texas is good? Of course it's good for college football when Texas is good. No one's saying that. We understand that for college basketball. It's good for college basketball when Duke's good and UNC's good and these perennial championship contenders. But when it comes to pro sports, and we look at, the Yankees are good, and the Dodgers are good, Mets are good, Cubs are good, the sport's broken. Why do you think that is, Stone? Like, why do we acknowledge in college sports it's good when these high-end programs are good? Like, we say that's good for the sport. We like those because they have a big fan base. But in pro sports, when that's the case, we're like, that sucks, and then the sport's broken.
Yeah, well, I think now in college sports, like, you're seeing that change a little bit. Like, Indiana just won the national title, and I think there's an opportunity for some of these other schools to throw their hat in the ring. Like, it feels like only a matter of time before Oregon gets one, right? Because they're backed by Phil Knight. That's $1 billion. He's got Nike right there. So you're seeing that these teams with more money are going to eventually have more success. Like Texas Tech, they're here to stay because they got all that money. Right, Texas A&M, all these colleges in Texas, they have so much money, so they're going to be here to stay. And again, I think the reason why everyone is so upset is that they look at the Dodgers, they look at their lineup, Betts, Freeman, Otani. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then you compare it to these other lineups and staffs across the league, and you go, okay, there's a big gap here. Like, even with some of these other teams that have a lot of high-profile players, there's a significant gap. And then you look and say, well, they've won the past 2 World Series and they win a ton of games and they dominate that division. And then people get frustrated. But again, we're not having this conversation. If Toronto's able to just make one One more play, and they were so close. Like, as we get further removed from this, people are just going to say, oh, yeah, Dodgers world champions. But we were talking about that World Series in depth. Like, literally just a tiny break, one play. You go back to that Game 7, there was multiple opportunities for the Blue Jays to win. And if that happens, we're not complaining as a fan base of baseball as much as we are right now.
Now, I will admit, and you're right, and that's part of the reason that we're so close to seeing the Dodgers win the championship, and then we're talking about this completely differently. I mean, we're still probably having similar conversations, but then I could sit here and just go like, the randomness of baseball always supersedes the economics of it. But that's not the case. The Dodgers win, and the randomness didn't win out. And I will admit, full hand, as Kirby always likes to tell me whenever I argue this, and it's part of the times I argue, it's tongue-in-cheek, as you guys know. He says, now we've got the Dodgers not even trying in the regular season, and that does scare me. Because we've seen how damaging that's been to the association, to the NBA, to having teams just kind of coast through the regular season where it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is April and May. Half the teams are tanking. Half the teams are just playing until they can get everyone healthy for the postseason. Then they really turn it on. We can't have that in baseball. Now it's 162 games, so you lose the sense of urgency that the NFL has, where they're playing 17, where every single game is critically important. But we can't have the Dodgers just coasting through and winning 95 games, winning the West, and then, all right, now we've got the whole team together for the postseason. We can't have that happen as well. And when I posed the question, what's the difference between college sports, where we acknowledge that these good teams is good for sports. We talk about Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Texas, these powerhouses. It's good for them to be good for the sport. But in baseball, we don't want that. And football and basketball, we don't want that. We don't want the Knicks to. I think we even talk about it in the NBA sometime. We need the Knicks to be good. It's good for basketball when the Knicks are good, but when the Dodgers are good, it's terrible for basketball or terrible for baseball. And Everett Henry put in the chat, it's because before a few years ago, these players were amateurs. Okay, so it's the money aspect of it all. That's what we were hung up because I thought the money was just a means to the end of them stockpiling talent, right? The money is just a means in which the Dodgers stockpile the talent. Well, in college football, the talent had always been stockpiled at these major programs. Georgia's third tackle was the fifth best tackle in the country. The backup quarterbacks are 5 stars. Linebackers that play everywhere else in the country aren't playing at Ohio State because they can't crack the field. So I guess miss me. So we're just hung up on the money aspect of it all because I thought the money was just a means of which they were stockpiling the talent. So I think there's more similarities between college football and Major League Baseball than we are willing to admit. And we've seen it now. College football is a more equitable sport. And it's a more enjoyable product for guys like me that don't have an allegiance to one team, that are just casually watching it. And I'll tell you right now that when the Dodgers, Yankees, so on, are good, Cubs, good, Red Sox, good, Mets, good, when those teams are good, it's a more enjoyable product for the lay person. But that doesn't ease the concerns of being a Brewers fan or being a Reds fan or being a Buccos fan or being a Royals fan or any of the small markets. That doesn't ease the concerns because you feel like, as my boss, Trace Fowler, has put, rooting for the Reds feels like rooting for Rutgers football at times. That's a fair analogy. And maybe we will get somewhere. And you know what? I hope they do. And that's coming from a guy that's part of the teams that is a haves, not a have-nots. To where if the Cubs ever spin like they should, then they will be a have. And they've got a good season coming up, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. 2026, we got one more year, and then they'll either change the sport for presumably the better, or they'll kneecap all their momentum that they've had. And I'll be intrigued to see how long the lockout. We had a lockout, 4 years ago? We had a lockout in 94. Had a lockout in the 80s. We'll see how drastic it is in hurting baseball in 2027. Or Yeah, 2027. I always forget what year it is because we are 3 months into January. All right, before we move on to some NFL talk, yeah. Sam has not gotten back to me, so, man, it's a bummer. Oh, well.
If you want, you can send me his number and I can call him.
I was just DMing him. It was all DM.
Okay.
I sent him a note. Baseball's top 100 came out. Pete Crow Armstrong better than Ellie De La Cruz.
Oh,
man.
Yeah.
It's tough scenes for your Reds guys.
Yeah, that's a tough scene. But the fact that our guy Andrew Abbott was in there, that's not bad for a 3. He makes the top 100. A 3 gets in there. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, where's he around? Let's see. He's in the 90s, right?
Right.
I'm pulling it up right now. Better than Dylan Cease. Better than Carlos Rodon. Did you see the Zips? The Fangraphs projections. They have Andrew Abbott about a 3-win player, which is a good player. It's a good player. So we will see where we're at going. All right, let's talk a little NFL. Let's talk Cincinnati Bengals. Dan Pitcher did not get the job down in Tampa Bay for the Buccaneers. He will not be their OC. They went in a different direction. It's the second consecutive year that he's been up for that job, if I recall, and second consecutive year that he hasn't got it. So the question is thus, Stone, do you believe Dan Pitcher will be back? It seems likely. And what does this do for a reunion with Brian Callahan here in Cincinnati?
Yeah, it seems like at this point he's going to be back with Cincinnati. Obviously, he is still has his name in there for the Cleveland Browns head coach opening. It doesn't seem like any other head coach openings are interested at this point in Dan Pitcher. We'll see if any other play-calling offensive coordinator slots open up and if he perhaps would garner interest from some other teams. But also of note, as you mentioned, Callahan was the first guy that Tampa had reached out to, and he had his second interview. So it kind of looked like he was the lead guy for that job. He doesn't get that job, and there's plenty of OC jobs still open here at this point, so we don't want to say anything for certain right now. But I think there's a world where both Dan Pitcher and Callahan are on this staff next season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Would they create some new title for Callahan? Yeah, I think a lot of us, myself, were surprised that the second he got fired from the Titans, that he wasn't back here in Cincinnati with Zach Taylor at Paycor Stadium. But I think there's a world where they have Dan Pitcher stay and they can still bring in Callahan, because you don't know this for certain, but it feels like he's not going to want to take a year off from being around the team. And if he can't get an OC job, he's going to come back with Zach Taylor, and they're going to create some type of role with him. You would think that would be the case, and I think that would go a long way for the Bengals.
Yeah, but I guess it turns out to, are the Bengals going to give up? I don't know what Dan Pitcher makes as an OC. I don't know what Brian Callahan made as an OC. Is Brian Callahan gonna take it? That's going to cost money for the Browns, or for the Brown family. It's going to cost money for the Bengals. And while it seems easy to just say, yeah, just bring back Brian Callahan and have him work under Zach Taylor with Dan Pitcher and kind of have that trio once again in the room, which obviously was very successful a few years ago when, I don't know if you knew this, Bengals made back-to-back AFC championship games and made a Super Bowl. I don't know if that's ever been brought up on this show.
And Dan Hurley's a Bengals fan.
Yeah, and Dan Hurley is a Bengals fan. That's true. Kyle Schwarber's from Middletown.
He is.
Do you think – I don't know what Brian Callahan's going rate is. I don't know what kind of money he's going to be looking at. And he presumably can get a job in the room somewhere to where if he's not an OC, it makes a lot of sense for him to come to Cincinnati. But what happens if Cincinnati's not willing to pay him $1 million and someone else will?
Well, that's the thing. If someone else will, then he'll go. But right now, nobody – has hired him. Nobody is interested in his services here at this point. And, would he go back to being a quarterback coach for somebody? Maybe. But, there's a world where he doesn't get an OC job this year, and then he's looking around going, well, I got to just do something this year. He's made a bunch of money as a coach, so he could step away, but I don't know if that'd be the greatest thing in the world for him to do. And if you're Zach, you're doing whatever you can to get him back. So as far as what the salary looks like, I don't know. They're not going to take some of Dan Pitcher's salary and give it to Callahan, but they have the money. We know this, but they just don't like spending it. I think that the Brown family would talk with Zach and be like, okay, we can spend a few $100,000 to get Callahan back if another team doesn't want him to be the play caller.
Yeah, when you're getting $4 million to be a head coach, you want to continue to coach. I think that the going rate isn't going to be. And once again, I don't know what Dan Pitcher's making. I don't know what the Bengals can offer, but I'm with you. If this team can't afford a couple $100,000 to get that trio back in the same room, have a guy that was pretty committed to the Cincinnati Bengals, Brian Callahan, and bring him back in, if they're unwilling to do that, then what are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, what kind of an operation are we running here? It's a mom and pop operation. That's exactly what it is. All right, let's talk more NFL news. The Buccaneers signed who to be their offensive coordinator? What's his name?
Zach Robinson, former Bengals legend. Zach Robinson, former OC of the Atlanta Falcons.
Do you think that is a great hire for the Buccaneers?
Yeah, that job, and I've said this several times, like the Tampa OC job is a very great job because you have Baker. You can win with Baker. Like I could say if you have a good enough team around him, you might be able to win a championship with Baker Mayfield. I don't think that's hyperbolic, right? And then you have the skill guys offensively, your young receivers, McMillan and Ibuka, your veterans and Evans and Godwin. So it's a very intriguing job, and Robinson has had success. He was a former player, former quarterback, was Bengals backup for a couple of years, and has been the OC in Atlanta for the past few, and has done an admirable job, I think. And he's a McVay guy. He spent his early coaching career with the Los Angeles Rams. And when you put him in a spot where he gets to call the plays, he doesn't have a Zach Taylor type guy as a head coach that's going to call the plays. He's going to call the plays. He has the weapons to work with. He has the skill players. He's proven he can do it in the past. I think it's a good hire, and clearly Baker Mayfield wanted him as well.
Okay. All right, so I just found this ESPN article that ranks the top 100 NFL MVP candidates. So they ranked 1 through 100 who had the most impact on their team. You want to guess which Cincinnati Bengal had the highest impact on the team in a positive light this season?
If you're asking me, it must not be the obvious answer, so I'm not going to say Joe Burrow, even though that's what I think, and instead I'll say Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase is correct. They have him listed at 19, just behind Quinion Mitchell and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And you know what? That's fair because, I mean, yes, Joe Burrow would you think it'd be the obvious answer, but he had a negative impact on this team because he got hurt for nine games. Like, yeah, when he was here, the team was good. He's here, but if we're talking who had the most positive impact on the team, well, when you're not here for 9 games, that is a negative impact, and it's not his fault, right? It's never your fault when you get hurt, but that is just a fact of the matter. And Jamar Chase, as I mentioned many times, is I believe going to be the best Bengal when it's all said and done. Unless like Joe Burrow wins 2 Super Bowls, then we're having a completely different conversation. But I feel very confident in saying Jamar Chase will be one of the greatest wide receivers ever. I was just reminded of his highlight tape about how many times we've seen him just completely break away from a defense to go to the end zone. So they had Jamar Chase at number 19. You want to guess who the number 1 most impactful player that wasn't a quarterback, according to this ESPN top 100 MVP candidates, was? He comes in at number 8. The top 7 are all quarterbacks.
Okay. Offensive or defensive?
Is an offensive player.
McCaffrey.
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Oh.
Yeah, that's good. Puka Nacua actually up there as well. Christian McCaffrey didn't get listed on. Did you see that the 49ers have looked into the electromagnetic field? Did you see that?
I'm sure that excites you. I did see that come across the wire. Do you have any more thoughts on that, Reed?
I do have a few more thoughts. How can we get an electromagnetic field outside of Miller Park or American Guarantee, whatever the Brewers field's called nowadays? How can we get that going on out there as we are filibustering here in the final 10 minutes of the show because we have seemingly had a big old pocket of the time ran out. But yeah, I thought that's interesting. It's a fun. That's what the internet's all about, man. And when you're at your wit's end, like you are the 49ers, about all these injuries presumably piling up, you've got to at least fall on something eventually. You've at least got to say, like, all right, this is at least part of the reason why this is happening. And whether it's just completely junk science, which it probably is, you got to at least look into it. Hey, shout out to the 49ers from doing their due diligence going for them. All right, so I got to ask you about the conference championship. We'll go into a little more in depth as we get later on into tomorrow. We're gonna have Clay Snowden on tomorrow to talk about the Cincinnati Reds. But Patriots Broncos, that spread has come down to 4. It's actually been dropped a point 4.5 in favor of the visiting Patriots. Do you think the Broncos have any chance this weekend?
Yeah, I absolutely think they have a chance. I'm not going to predict them to win. But, again, what would we talk about with C.J. Stroud? How he just needs to go out there, run the operation, hand the ball off, punts are fine, right? Check it down. Don't be overly aggressive. Like, that's what Stidham needs to do. Like, there's a reason this team is in the AFC Championship game. It's not like they're the Bills where they, got to this point in the postseason where it was really their quarterback and that was it. Broncos are a great team, and they're very, very well coached. And if there's one coach out there that I said, you know what, with a backup and an AFC title game can get him in a spot where he needs to be, it's Sean Payton. It's absolutely Sean Payton. So I'm going to say that Denver has an opportunity in this game. We all have no clue what we're going to get from Stidham. You've heard great things about him. When Sean Payton got to Denver, the first thing he did was sign Jarrett Stidham as his backup and pay him pretty hefty salary for a backup. We all were like, what are we doing here? Well, we're going to see if that worked out because clearly he's got a lot of love for him. He's played a handful of games, right? He sat behind Brady. I'm sure that's helpful. And he's got a great head coach in Sean Payton. So I don't think he's going to be over his skis in this game. I'm not going to say he's going to play well, but I don't think he's going to melt in front of everybody in this game. I think he'll put them in a position to win. However, with the backup quarterback, obviously at a disadvantage. But the gut says New England, but this is absolutely a ball game. I think a lot of us are rooting for the Patriots just because we don't want to see a backup quarterback in the Super Bowl. But there's absolutely a real world where Denver wins. It's at their place. That place is going to be rocking, and they're going to be playing with a lot of pride in this game, playing for their guy that got hurt. And Sean Payton's going to have them ready to go, and he clearly feels good about having Stidham out there. And it's not like Jake Browning's going out there. Stidham can play a lot more than him.
Listen, Jarrett Stidham, I'm quick to completely write off the Denver Broncos. And the reason I'm quick to completely write off the Denver Broncos is because, one, I think the Pats are for real. And I've been on the Bo Nix hater train. If it's a spectrum of whether you believe in Bo Nix or not, I'm certainly closer to not believing Bo Nix. And the reason is because there's great portions of the game in every game that I've seen him play where he has been inefficient, he's been ineffective as a quarterback. But when it comes to Bo Nix, when it comes to him, this Broncos team's played 11 games that have been decided by one score. 11 wins. That's not games. 11 wins that have been decided by one score. And say what you want about Bo Nix, a great deal of those wins have come because he has stepped up. He had made a great play. You could say for 3 quarters he looked terrible, but if you remember that Eagles game, that fourth quarter lights it up. That game they just played against the Bills, when it came to winning time, Bo Nix stepped up. And I just don't believe if this game's going to be a close game that Jarrett Stidham's going to have the ability, he's going to have that big play potential to step up. I think they're a great team, a well-rounded team. I just don't think Jarrett Stidham's going to have what it takes. So I'm going to take the Pats in this one. Drake May, great coach, Mike Vrabel. Drake May's one of the MVP candidates. And it does suck that Boston, New England, they've just had such a great run. I mean, they've just had such a great run over the last 25 years in all their teams. Celtics have won 1. No, they've won 2. The Celtics have won 2. The Red Sox have won 3. And the Patriots have won $1 billion. So that's a little frustrating. It looks like they're likely going to win the AFC. But you're not counting them out. I will count them out. I will count out the Broncos. I think the Patriots win this one pretty easily. Now the harder game to kind of unpack is the Seahawks. The Seahawks and the Rams. 2.5-point spread up there in Seattle. The Seahawks are the most well-rounded team, but it's hard to count out Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. Do you think the Rams can pull off the upset? Do you think they will pull off the upset this Sunday?
Yes, I do. I like the Rams in this spot. It might come back to bite me because I've been, I was anti-Caleb Williams forever, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm right. He played great in big-time moments, but eventually, the magic ran out, right? And I'm kind of doing the same thing here with Sam Darnold, and I like Sam Darnold. I just don't trust him. Right, and I get when you're the 1 seed, you're in a spot where you have to play one less game, which is a massive advantage. The Patriots and Tom Brady did that all the time. It's like you blink, they play one game against a team that's one of the worst teams in the playoffs, and boom, they're in the conference championship game, and you're a win away from the Super Bowl. And that's the situation Seattle finds himself in now. I agree. They are the most well-rounded team. Mike Macdonald is tremendous. What a hire that was by John Schneider. We sat here at the trade deadline and said the best move was Rashid Shaheed. He's won them like the past couple of games, what he's been able to do as a return specialist and a receiver. So they're a really good football team. No denying that. But I got a lot of belief in Matthew Stafford and his ability to be clutch in these big moments. I think he was kind of bad for much of that Chicago game, inaccurate with the football.
No doubt.
It's hard to see him having kind of a back-to-back, I'm not going to say stinker because he played well at the end when it counted, but back-to-back suspect performances. Again, this is a guy that's the MVP, or should be the MVP in my opinion. So I think he's going to help elevate them. Sean McVay is going to have them locked in. And, I don't think – because, Darnold didn't have to do anything in the game against San Francisco. They ran the kickback immediately, and it was just, hand it off. And, the Niners couldn't move the ball at all. They scored 6 points. So there was nothing that Darnold had to do in that game. So credit to him for getting a playoff win. It's not like he played great in the game. He's going to have to show some stuff and be a reason why Seattle wins this game. And I'll take the quarterback in that spot, Matthew Stafford, over.
Yeah, that's where I'm fading. You take – I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's done you well if you just pick the better quarterback in most of these games. It's going to be warmer in Seattle. It's going to be about 45 degrees than it was in Chicago. So you got to anticipate that the Rams will play a little better. And shorting Sam Darnold's not a terrible place to be. He's got a lot of weapons. It's going to come down to, as oftentimes these games are, is who holds on to the ball a little bit better. Sam Darnold makes some big time mistakes, and the Rams will win this one. It'll be interesting to see. Stone, thank you so much for filibustering with me today here on today's show. As a recap, Rich Pitino's a great coach. Hopefully wins on Saturday. Wes Miller stinks as a coach. Pacman Jones is a clown. Cubs fans are sometimes maybe don't know the clocks were all that well. And baseball is just as bad of a spot as it was, as we talked about it a week ago, because a team that won 97 games went to the NLCS, traded away their ace pitcher in a season where they were looking to contend, and that's just as damning on the sport as it is for the Dodgers signing Kyle Tucker for $240 million, as we talked about last week. So, Stone, what's going to come on the 11 o'clock hour?
Yeah, so we're going to talk some Cincinnati Bengals. We'll talk about the pitcher stuff, talk about the Callahan stuff, touch on the Pacman stuff there as well. Talk about Jeff Hafley. He takes the Dolphins job. I've been a big Jeff Hafley guy. I remember a lot of people kind of rolled their eyes when he was head coach at Boston College and said, actually, I'm out. I'm going to go take this D.C. job in Green Bay, bet on himself. Worked beautifully. Now he has an opportunity in Miami. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Bearcats, their lack of offense, certainly in the second half, but, some promising aspects. And that's really been kind of the story of the Wes Miller tenure is it's not absolutely awful. They show flashes, but ultimately it's not good enough and it doesn't result in enough wins. We'll talk about that. I didn't really talk about the Red Hawks yesterday, so we'll spend some time talking about that. I told you yesterday I was going to go to a game on the 31st. Apparently it's $150 to get into Millette Hall.
No way.
Against Northern Illinois. This is what I'm hearing, Reed.
No way.
This is what I'm hearing.
I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Listen, you're an honest man. I could describe you as a lot of ways. One thing I will gladly describe you as, you're an honest man. Yeah. I don't believe you, though. Yeah. I think you got bad information.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't. I got information from my buddy, the same buddy that talked about the divisional round, who you love to bring up, about how that's the best weekend in pro football, which it is.
It's good.
Yeah.
He said best weekend of the year, pro sports. In sports.
Yeah, but he's a football guy.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Aren't we all? See you guys tomorrow.
we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Thursday, January 22nd. And we got lots to talk about here on a Thursday. We're going to spend some time talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, as there's a couple of Bengals news items that we need to get to. Dan Pitcher, we've been talking about this all week. Is he staying? Is he leaving? Now it looks like the needle is shifting towards him staying, because he did not get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers OC job. He's still in the running for the Browns head coaching job. There's other coordinator jobs that are still open that he could potentially be involved with, but at this point he hasn't interviewed anywhere else, at least not to my knowledge. And Brian Callahan was also a front runner for the Tampa Bay OC job. He did not get that job, and he really isn't in the mix for any of these jobs at this point right now as well. Could Dan Pitcher and Brian Callahan be back on the Bengals staff for the 2026 season? I think that certainly would be positive for the Cincinnati Bengals. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Zach Robinson hire in general for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, he went on Twitter and he had some thoughts as it relates to Kevin Stefanski, quote, shipping him off like a piece of garbage. So we'll talk about Baker. We'll talk about the Bucs. We'll talk about Dan Pitcher. Also, Pacman Jones went on Julian Edelman's podcast, and he just absolutely ripped Andy Dalton to shreds. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but I do have a few thoughts. Usually, general rule of thumb, when Adam Pacman Jones talks, kind of roll your eyes, shake your head, move on, right? When he's returning a punt, you lock in because good things are going to happen. But he's said and done some very questionable things over the course of his career, certainly, and post-football life there as well. So, I think the premise of what he's saying actually is accurate, but it felt a little unnecessary, I guess is what I'll say there about that. Also, we got to talk about the Buffalo Bills and their owner and the press conference that they had yesterday with the GM. Beane, of course, Terry Pegula is his name, and that was just a complete disaster. And, you know, people make fun of the Bengals, how they operate as an organization, but I think if you're an NFL person and you watch what transpired in West New York yesterday, if you're the Bengals, you got to be smiling a little bit because you get drugged through the mud all the time, and rightfully so. But you look pretty good after a press conference like that for the Buffalo Bills, Beane and Pegula and those guys. So we'll talk about that a little bit, how it correlates to the Cincinnati Bengals. Also, Jeff Hafley, we've been meaning to talk about this for a couple of days now, is taking the head coaching job with the Miami Dolphins. And he was kind of in an interesting situation. He bet on himself. He was a head coach making millions of dollars, albeit at Boston College. And he says, you know what, I'm leaving for a coordinator spot in the NFL. This NIL stuff, it's not for me. My best path to being a head coach at a prominent place, whether collegiately or in the NFL, is by going and being a coordinator. He bet on himself. Probably, you know, a lot of people that trusted him to go out to Boston College and be on his staff kind of got the short end of the stick. But, you know, he was selfish, rightfully so, and it worked out for him. So we'll spend some time talking about the Hafley stuff and also a little Cincinnati Reds conversation. Peralta, the one for the Milwaukee Brewers, has been dealt to the Mets. And that's not great for baseball. We know this. Now, for the Brewers, they've done this in the past where they have these good players, Adames, Hader, whoever, and it comes time to give them a big money contract, and they say, no, we're just going to trade him. Now, if you're a Brewers fan, I'm sure it's a little bit frustrating, but all you do is win the NL Central. So, clearly, from a scouting and development perspective, they know what they're doing over in Milwaukee. So, they're in a fine spot there, but at the same time, it's not good for the sport. Right? It's not good for the sport just to ship these guys off. The Mets get them. And, I have some thoughts on how baseball is kind of structured right now. Is the Dodgers are getting a lot of crap. And I'm not going to fully defend the Dodgers, but I do think there's some perspective and some nuance that we need to discuss here about where Major League Baseball is at. We'll spend some time talking about that. Miguel Andujar, we were all joking and laughing beginning of the offseason where it's like, something tells me this big free agent bat that we keep talking about is going to be in the form of Miguel Andujar for the Reds. And it looks like things are trending in that direction, which at the end of the day, I don't think is a bad thing. Like, I'll take Miguel Andujar back. He was really good for this team, especially against left-handed pitching. And their offense elevated a little bit after they made the deal to acquire him. Nice move by Nick Krall. Deserves credit for that, but we'll spend some time talking about that. Also, our Chatterbox Reds guys, Nick Kirby, Craig Sandlin, they had a podcast that went out this morning kind of talking about what to do at that number 2 position in the lineup, and if we have some time, we will touch on that as well. And oh, by the way, the Miami Redhawks, they're really good at basketball, as we didn't really talk about them on the show yesterday, but a thrilling overtime victory against Kent State. By the way, that environment was awesome. Our very own Nick Kirby was actually there, boots on the ground. at Kent State. But I would love, and I don't know exactly what the new basketball venue is going to look like for the Miami Redhawks, but you go to Millette, and, is there some history behind that building? Sure. I graduated in that building. They have a lot of events there, but it doesn't really feel like a place for Division I college basketball here in the year of 2026. But that Kent State arena, I like that. The small size to it. It was kind of compact. I like that for college basketball. That's why Cameron's so great, because it's small and everybody's on top of each other, and it creates a raucous environment, and you got that in the MAC. And as they continue to travel around the MAC, especially if they win these games, it's going to look like that. But I'm interested to see what the new venue will look like for Miami. And by the way, I had a friend tell me this. I didn't fact check him, so he might be wrong. But I'm hearing, we were planning on going to the game here next Saturday on the 31st. And apparently it's like $150 to get into Millette Hall. They're playing Northern Illinois, who's terrible. The Redhawks should absolutely smack them. They've only won a handful of games. But if that's accurate information, again, I need to fact check. But if that's accurate information, that's absurd, right? And I don't know if that's exactly well done from the Miami Athletic Department. If they finally have a team that's good and there's people that are interested in coming to the game, we're going to charge $150. Something tells me I'm missing something there. But we'll talk a little bit about the Redhawks. Travis Steele, we had him on the show, actually. They were like 5-0, 6-0 when we had him on. We're going to have to try to get him back on, because now they're really taking the country by storm, right? As they are in a spot now where they are 20-0. Miami Redhawks, Miami basketball. Pretty hard to believe. Pretty amazing stuff. But appreciate everyone as always. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. We're like right at 21,500 subscribers here at the channel. Help us out. Subscribe. We're here every day, Monday through Friday. Check out the podcast, wherever you get the podcast. Apple, iHeart, Spotify, you name it. Leave us a 5-star review. That really goes a long way for us. I understand if you're live, you're not listening to the podcast, but that's fine. Go over there, help us out, leave us a 5-star review. That would be greatly appreciated. Really would go a long way for us at Chatterbox, and of course, me and the show as well. So help us out and do that if you haven't done so already. Like the stream if you're watching live. Be on the lookout for our clips that go out on YouTube and social media. I get it's kind of a dead period here at this point. We would love to be talking about the Bengals playing in the AFC Championship, going to Denver, facing Jarrett Stidham. That's not what we're talking about, unfortunately. But there's a couple of months here as we close things with the Bengals and open things, of course, with the Cincinnati Reds. Kind of a, quote-unquote dead period. But our coverage here at Chatterbox is going to continue, because there's lots of stuff to talk about. We got the draft coming in April. Biggest draft in my life as a Cincinnati Bengals fan. Have to get it right, and specifically have to get the number 10 pick right. We've got free agency. That's going to be awesome. Bengals are going to be active, right? Are they going to sign these huge name guys? No, but they're going to sign some guys that are going to be asked to come in here and be starters. We got free agency taken care of. Plenty of Reds coverage coming our way shortly. We've got Reds people lined up to come on the show next week. That should be very exciting. Won't give away too much there. But spring training around the corner, lots of reason to be optimistic. And we'll continue to talk college basketball as well. And we'll put more of an emphasis on that here over the course of the next 2 weeks. But help us out. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And we appreciate the heck out of each and every one of you who are here and, of course, make this possible for us. But the Bearcats, they were in action last night on the heels of a huge victory, the biggest victory in Wes Miller's career as the head coach of the Cincinnati Bearcats at home against Iowa State. And we talked about it. There was a number, and that number was 2 next to Iowa State, but they were coming off the loss against Kansas. And Iowa State's a good team. They're a tournament team. They're a top 20 team in the country, maybe even top 15. But 2, that was a bit aggressive. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. They were number 2 when they came into Clifton, and Cincinnati took care of business in that game. And then they followed it up. After defeating the number 2 team, they had to go on the road to face the number 1 team. And there's no denying how great of a team that Arizona is. What Lloyd has done, their head coach, is tremendous. He's got freshmen all over the place, 3 of them that play lots of minutes. I mean, LeBron James' son doesn't even get in the game, right? And they've got some bigs that can bang with you down low. Chom was off in the game last night. But it was really a challenge for Cincinnati in this game. Now, I think the takeaway from this game is a little bit different had Cincinnati closed the door in some of these matchups. If they had beaten Eastern Michigan at home, if they didn't just get obliterated by Georgia in that game, if they held on to win one of these close games late, opportunities against West Virginia, what would happen if maybe they finished that game off, right? Different opportunities throughout their course of the schedule to pick up some wins. Maybe we would look at this game from more of a positive light if there were some more victories when you look at the standings for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Unfortunately, that is not the case, And now the conversation returns to negativity around this Bearcats team. And I do think you should be intrigued because, again, Arizona's the real deal. There's value on saying they're going to win the national title. Like, that's not there. There's no flukes here. They're going to drop a game or two, obviously. Nobody runs the table. They're going to lose at some point. But they should be, I don't know, I haven't checked the odds, but they should be the favorite to win it all, or at least the top 3 favorite to win it all. And for much of this game, Cincinnati hung in there. First half, they hung in there. Did Arizona play their best? No. Shots weren't falling. They shot like 20% from 3, which was a little bit better than what Cincinnati shot from 3. But they hung in there. They made some stands defensively. Buck Harris, kind of a frustrating player to watch. You know, we talked about when he came in here from the portal how it was going to be hard not to love Buck Harris, and it is because the energy and enthusiasm and effort that he plays with, but his role kind of changed, right? They need him to be a starter for him now, and he's not coming off the bench anymore. He's not just that spark plug guy. They need him to be a really good player, and unfortunately, he's great defensively and brings a lot to the table in that regard, but from an offensive perspective, he doesn't offer much at all. Right, he doesn't offer much at all. The 3 he shot, like, he let go of that thing, and it's like, oh, my goodness, that might not hit the rim. Like, when he shoots the ball, whether it be from the free throw line or, I mean, he smokes layups, too, certainly from the outside. He shouldn't be allowed to shoot from the outside, even if nobody is within 10 feet of him. But when the shot goes up, it just looks like there's no chance for Buck Harris. Now, he's still a valuable player to this team, but they've got to find ways to find offense from some of these other guys. And we've seen it. You know, there's been some games where Baba, you know, doesn't have to play elite for them to win. Namely the last game against Iowa State. But I think when we take a look back at the season, when it's all said and done, we're going to sit here and go, yeah, Baba needs to be really good in order for Cincinnati to compete in this conference. And he was fine, right? He scored some points in the game. I thought he played with a physicality that was, intriguing against a really tough physical team in Arizona. But he wasn't good enough. And then Cham. You can't have these no-show games. And I get Arizona has bigs down there. They can bang. They're really tough. They're really physical, 7+ feet, right? I mean, that is a legit college basketball team. But if Cincinnati's going to go in there against top-of-the-line competition in this conference, right, this isn't Big 12 football we're talking about. Big 12 basketball, this is the real deal. And if Cham's going to go into these games and not play well, it's going to be very difficult for them to beat any of the top teams in this league. Right, and that's what they found themselves into. They were able to hang in there, right? Hung in there in the first half. You get the break, you're out. You're elated with how they performed in the first half. And then there was a point there, like 5 minutes in the second half, where they had it within a bucket. Right? Again, Arizona wasn't playing their best basketball. The shots weren't falling for them. They were missing some easy stuff. But still, you were right there on the road. It was a hostile environment, by the way. That place was flipped upside down. The energy in there was tremendous. But then eventually you go on that cold streak offensively. You look at the scoreboard after the game. You score 50 points, 51 points. You're not going to win many games in college basketball. You can't do that. And Arizona went on a run, distanced themselves, and then Cincinnati. They're in a spot where when they get behind, they just don't have that guy that can go on a run and, put the team on his back, like some of those guys, like a Sean Kilpatrick in the Cronin era or a couple other of those players there as well. They don't have anybody on the team like that can do that. So once it gets out of hand, you're on the road, it's the best team in the country, you're in a tough spot, and they ultimately weren't able to get back into the game after that. But I think the guard play, right, is certainly a huge issue in the game for Cincinnati. Again, Day-Day, they need him to be really good, and the shots weren't falling for Day-Day in this game. Jizzle James, he's back. Where are we going to see those elements of freshman Jizzle James? That kind of took us by storm. Didn't see that in the game either. Celestine made a couple of shots, but overall the guard play wasn't even close to good enough in this game. And Kirk Risa clearly is not back to being fully ready to go. He played a minute in the game. A nice tribute from Arizona. He spent several years there, played high-level basketball for Lloyd and those guys in Tucson. But, coming back from the injury, I guess my gut just says he's not fully in basketball shape, and that's why he's, not out there, because the guard play was not good at all for Cincinnati in the game. And you would think if Kerr was able to, take some of those minutes, he would go in and play more. But ultimately that didn't happen. The guard play, the bad shooting has been a theme for Cincinnati all year, and then the turnovers. Right? I mean, if you're going to turn it over like that on the road against the best team, you're cooked. Right? You are absolutely cooked. And there were some careless turnovers, some bad shot selection. And that's kind of what Reed alluded to off the bench, where on one side of the floor defensively, you look at the Cats and you go, it's pretty intriguing. Right? Feel pretty good about how they're performing on that side of the floor. And then they get to the offensive side, and it's just like street ball, and they're taking bad shots and doing some, three-man weave stuff at the top, but it looks like they really have no purpose out there on the floor offensively, and then they take a bad shot at the end of the shot clock, right? Or they turn it over. They're not tough with the basketball down low. And, the bigs for Arizona are really, really good, but like when Cham was in the post with those guys, you just felt like the Bearcats didn't really have a chance in the game. So and when you turn it over like that and you don't shoot that well at all, less than 20% again from three, that's happened many times this year for Cincinnati, not a winning formula. On the road against the best team, you're not going to win. That's just the reality of the situation. But from a positive perspective, if there's one positive sign, the fact that you hung in there for as long as you did, right? It was a big spread. Obviously, Cincinnati didn't end up covering it at the end of the game. But I think a lot of people thought that they would kind of go in and get boat raced. They hung in there, and, there was like a 10-4 start for Arizona, and you're like, oh, this thing's getting ugly. And then UC fights back. They play well defensively, made a few shots there in the first half, particularly Sean McDermott, which is another positive. We'll talk about him in a second. But hanging in there, going on the road, and doing that, I do think there's some positivity as it relates to that. Again, the vibe around this game is totally different. Had you beaten Eastern Michigan, had you beaten Georgia, had you beaten West Virginia, some of these games that were winnable, right? And if you had shown, a better effort and you didn't get blown out by a team like Georgia, right? Then I think we view this game a little bit differently. But with all the losses they've had, all the frustration, it's hard to really do that, especially if you didn't watch the whole game and you just look up and say, well, you scored 50 points and lost by 20+. That's not good, right? And if there was one other positive thing to mention about this team in this game, it's Sean McDermott, which, he was only getting a handful of minutes. This guy comes in. He's the highest-rated recruit in the history of Cincinnati basketball since Lance Stevenson. And it's supposed to be this guy that can really be a trailblazer for your program as a freshman. And you're looking at a year in college basketball, by the way, in 2026, where it's kind of the theme of college basketball this season is freshmen, star freshmen. You look at Wilson in North Carolina. You look at the two guys, Pete and Barry's, for Arizona, who have been tremendous. And, of course, Boozer there at Duke. I mean, the list kind of Darren Peterson at Kansas. There's some stud freshmen that are going to be, a lot of them are going to be lottery picks. And I don't know if that was the expectation for Sean McDermott to be a lottery pick, but you expected him to be your best scorer, one of your best scorers on your team, and a guy that you could go to, and he started for much of the year. And then he went to the bench, and then he's playing less than 10 minutes on the bench. He finally got some stuff going. Some shots fell. He's got to work on his defense because he's a liability out there defensively. I think you would have seen Wes stick with him a little bit longer than he did over the course of these past 2 games had he been able to hold up his end of the bargain on the defensive side of the floor. But when you're getting attacked by the opposition, looking like a borderline cone out there defensively, and you can't make any shots, you don't really bring any value to the team. But to see him have some shots fall, the pace in which he played with offensively, I thought he hung in there better than he has in the past against, again, elite players on Arizona. That was another positive, right? Because if Cincinnati is going to have a chance this year as far as, winning some of these games in this conference, I'm not even going to throw out the tournament here at this point, but just winning some games against some good teams, they need Sean McDermott. Right, I mean, he is too talented of a guy. He's too high of a recruit. And so much of their identity coming into this year was him scoring points for them. And he has to get to that point if they're going to have a chance. Positive that you saw that from Abayev. He's, from a mannerism perspective, it's always kind of tough to read him because sometimes I feel like is he disengaged right now? Does he have bad body language right now? But I think that's just kind of how he operates. Like he's very, doesn't show much emotion. That's just kind of who he is and who he has been as a player when you look at, him playing prior to getting to Cincinnati. But, credit to him. You hear from West and you always see Scott Springer and guys on the beat are like, yeah, first guy out here shooting is Sean McDermott. So I think the effort there is, the intentionality is certainly there as well, and hopefully it can result in some better performances against a team like that. That should be a confidence builder for Sean McDermott. But ultimately, too many turnovers, too many mistakes, too much bad shooting, and when all those things happen and you're on the road against the best team, you don't have a chance, right? You have to, it's like football, right? If you're getting outmanned, you can't turn the football over, right? You got to be good in short yardage, right? You got to be good in the red zone. Like in basketball, you can't turn the ball over as well. You got to hit your free throws. You got to shoot it decent from the outside if you're going to go into an environment like that against the best team and win. And when those things don't go your way, you don't have much of a chance. And they hung in there for longer than a lot of people thought. But at the end of the day, it's a lopsided score up there on the scoreboard, and Cincinnati loses. Real quickly on Xavier, I watch what Pitino's doing. I know I've said this a bunch of times, but I can't hammer it home enough. what he's done with the guys that he has. Like, you watch those guys, and not to disrespect any of these players on Xavier. Like, they're out there, they're competing, they're trying hard, but, like, comparative to some of these other teams, even within the Big East, which isn't the Big East that you grew up with, right? In the Big East, they got UConn, and, I mean, St. John's isn't as good as a lot of us thought going into the year. But, like, from a roster perspective, like, they just don't have the guys. And the fact that they were in the game, I know Creighton's having a down year. I understand that. But Creighton came into Cintas and beat the heck out of them. And then Xavier goes to Creighton and outplayed them, I thought. Through 40 minutes, they outplayed them. And obviously they didn't win the game. But to have that kind of a turnaround says a lot. Now, the inverse to that would be like, well, if you lose multiple games by 1 point, a lot of that's got to do with coaching there as well. And maybe that's true. But with this Xavier team, it doesn't really feel like that, right? Like, you're going to blame Patino for them not getting the defensive rebound. How about you put a body on somebody? Somebody put a body on the shooter, right? So you can go get a defensive rebound and win the game. Now, credit to the kid. He made a great shot off, like, the top of the glass. It was unbelievable. And, Xavier ends up losing the game. But what they've been able to do, like, I didn't think they would have as many wins as they do right now. And then you look at their schedule and you go, they had 3 other games right there. And the conversation around Xavier, had they just won 2 of those games at this point, is, oh my goodness, look at what Patino's doing. But, I mean, said it on off the bench, I'm not going to sit here and say that, they're a rocket ship necessarily, but would you rather be Xavier or would you rather be UC right now? I don't think there's really a debate there whatsoever. You would rather 100% be the Xavier Musketeers. I mean, a lot of it's just like, well, you got Trey Carroll out there. Who's going to be, his running mate? Who's going to help him out here? And I think Messina Moore did that last night. He showed some good stuff. But beyond that, Borovichinen or Milicevic or one of these guys needs to do a better job of stepping up. And, you got to go get a rebound at the end of the game. Like, come on. You have to go put a body on somebody and go get a defensive rebound. Kid made a great shot, but that's inexcusable, and that can't happen. Miami, what a start for Travis Steele and company. It's great. I mean, they're getting national attention, right? We had Travis Steele on early in the year. We're going to look to get him back on here soon and have a conversation with him. Looking forward to that. But I mentioned at the top, the rumors about how expensive tickets are getting at Millette. That's really hard for me to believe. But, everybody is going to give Miami their best shot, right? And, you could look at their schedule and say, well, it's a weak schedule. And it's fine, like, true, right? The teams, non-conference, didn't want to play Miami. They tried to schedule. Travis Steele's been saying that, right? Scott Van Pelt's been saying that on SportsCenter, right? But now, especially as long as they're undefeated, I don't care who they're playing. Like Northern Illinois here on the 31st. They're not a good team at all. You bet that's their Super Bowl, right? That's their NBA Finals Game 7 when they come into Millette to play the Red Hawks. So that's kind of what you have to deal with, like Nick Saban in Alabama. Each and every week. That's why it's so impressive what he was able to do. Yeah, he was playing in the SEC, which the SEC pre-NIL was as good as it gets. But every single week you're getting the best shot from every single team. That's what Miami's going to have to deal with this year, for especially as long as they're undefeated. And we'll see. Like, it's one thing if, they were like a boring team to watch, right? Like, I respect the heck out of Kelvin Sampson in Houston, but, like, if they were like a defensive team or whatever, like, would it be as fun? No. They shoot the rock. They spread the floor, and they shoot the rock, and it goes in. And they play with great pace. They get up and down the floor, and it's just an exciting brand of basketball to watch. And they've got shooters all over the place, one of them being Suter, of course, and they got a coach that's got a lot of confidence right now. It's great hearing Travis Steele, talk, because, I remember I was at the school when – he takes the job, and that first year was brutal. And, he came on our show, and he was like, when he was talking to the AD, David Saylor, he's like, we can't do this overnight, but we're going to do this thing the right way. We're going to still recruit, which it'll be interesting, especially how this year ends. Like, if that will stay their philosophy. I think in this day and age of college basketball, recruiting is huge, but I mean, if these kids, like, for instance, Perry, a role player who's a local guy, there's going to be teams calling about him. And he's not even getting a ton of minutes. He's not even one of their best players. But I don't know. They might have to dip into the portal a little bit more, especially if they have some success. But I thought this was the right way to do it initially. Build something. Build a foundation. And that's what Travis Steele has done. He's got some players that are bought in, and he's moving with a lot of confidence, Travis Steele. You hear him in these national interviews and press conferences or what have you, and he's got a heck of a lot of confidence, as he should, and his teams believe. And you can just see it when they're out there. And, watching the end of that Kent State game, it didn't look good for a while, and they just kept believing. And then they were able to get it to overtime, and you're like, oh, it's over right now, right? right? Kansas State had their chance. They're in overtime, and they're ready to roll. So it's an exciting brand of basketball, and it's crazy that it's happening down the road here in Oxford, Ohio. And this could be a team that's going to, captivate a lot of hearts from a lot of college basketball fans across the country, right? There's always a team that really does this, and it feels like that team is right here in Oxford and is going to be the Miami Redhawks. But they got to keep it going. Again, every team's going to give them their best chance, their best shot, and we'll see if they can't make a run in this thing. And, there's a world like where you're talking like 11 seed. Right, you're talking like you have a matchup that you could win in the first round. I know that's getting a little bit too far ahead of things, and they don't really have much room for error, if any at all. But I mean, at this point, there should be a little bit room for error. We'll see. But exciting times around Miami University and Travis Steele and the Miami Redhawks. All right, shifting our conversation a little bit to the Cincinnati Bengals. Talk about the Bengals every day, of course, here at the show. A lot has been made of Dan Pitcher. We've spent a lot of time, particularly this week, talking about it. I've talked about how I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't garnered more attention and consideration for a head coaching job. I think, if you had to explain why, you would say, well, he's not the play caller. It's Zach Taylor. And that's why you're seeing him entertain these other opportunities. That's why you saw him interview with Tampa last year and do it again this year. Right? We talked about how great of a job Tampa is, especially from a play caller perspective. And they're going in a different direction. They're hiring Zach Robinson, who is a Bengal. Or if you remember him, he was, 2011 in a couple of years in the quarterback room for Cincinnati, and has since turned into coaching. McVay scooped him up immediately. I think he was an assistant QB guy, assistant wide receiver guy, eventually pass game coordinator, and then, once you have a tree like that, like McVay does, there's going to be jobs that are calling for coordinator positions. That's what Atlanta did. They brought him in. I think he deserves some credit for what he did with Penix early. I think we're seeing that, the fact they took him at 8 is like, I don't know. Because, this day and age, you need a mobile quarterback, and Penix can't really move, which is, there's not really many guys like that in the league. Like Stafford, of course, is still playing, but like Penix is like right there with Jared Goff. Like the guy can't really move. Has had all the injuries in college. Now just had a very serious knee injury again here in the NFL. So the quarterback position in Atlanta is very up in the air. And I thought he did an admirable job. Right? If you remember at the end, Raheem Morris very nearly held on to his job because they won some games, certainly. And then, the big win against the Rams obviously was huge there as well. And I think a lot of people thought he would save his job with that. But the whole point being that Zach Robinson, he deserves another coordinator job somewhere. And Baker Mayfield clearly was pulling for him. So now you just kind of sit and wait if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's funny because you talk about continuity and cohesion and collaboration. Those are all the C words that the Bengals love using here. And there's a world where they could have Pitcher back and then bring in their guy, Brian Callahan. Right? Callahan was supposedly the front runner for the Tampa Bay job, interviewed there twice. They go with Zach Robinson. And, Callahan's name, he was involved with the Chargers job, of course, as well. And they went with Mike McDaniel. So there's a lot of options here where he might be back here in Cincinnati. There's still coordinator jobs that need to be filled. Callahan's not going to get a head coaching job, and it doesn't seem like Pitcher will unless it's Cleveland. There's been some rumblings and reports that they might just promote Jim Schwartz, which, that would be pretty Cleveland of them to do that. But I think there's a world where Pitch is back. Obviously not calling the plays. That'll be Zach Taylor. And then if you're the Bengals, I think you do whatever you can to get Brian Callahan back in the building if he can't land an offensive coordinator job. Because, things didn't go well in Tennessee for Callahan. He's not going to be a head coach in the NFL again. But he absolutely is a good coach, right? A good assistant coach, and I think a good coordinator there as well. So do you open up a new job title for him? I mean, you're not going to fire somebody. You're not going to make him a co-offensive coordinator with Pitcher. You're not going to demote Pitcher, right? You're not going to get rid of Brad Craigthorpe, your quarterback coach. Is there a role that you could come up with to insert him in your staff? To be honest, I was surprised when he got fired at Tennessee that he wasn't right here in Cincinnati the following week, but clearly has a great relationship with Zach Taylor. The Bengals, it seems like a no-brainer. They're going to want him to be back. I think there's a world where they can add him to the staff and keep Dan Pitcher, and that would be very valuable for the Cincinnati Bengals here at this point. But some quick thoughts there on the Zach Robinson stuff in Tampa. Baker Mayfield, which early in his career, I'm a Baker guy, right? I liked him when he was at Oklahoma. Thought it was a bit aggressive that he went number 1 overall, but had the Heisman, trophy, had the bravado and the confidence and the swag and the arm, right? So I was like, you know what, take him number 1 overall, see what happens. And I definitely think he got the short end of the stick in Cleveland. I think what really hurt him during his time in Cleveland is that he just is so tough that he played through so many injuries that really hindered his performance out there and made him seem like a lesser player than what he truly was. And then, as he pointed out in his social media post, they kind of just shipped him off like a piece of garbage. And there was a report that, the reporter phrased it like, the quarterback situations failed with Baker Mayfield and Deshaun Watson. I think certainly Deshaun Watson, that's a failure. But Baker quote tweeted it and was like, failed seems to be a bit of a stretch. And said he's still waiting to hear from Stefanski since he shipped him off like a piece of garbage, and said he's looking forward to playing him twice a year. So there's some fireworks as we move forth in the NFC South. But clearly Baker does not have a lot of love for Kevin Stefanski and how things ended there. And I expect Tampa to be a solid football team. They ran into some injuries this year. I was all over them early, and then they kind of came back down to life a little bit. And then Baker was banged up. He seemingly always is banged up, maybe again. That hindered his performance out there. But he was an advocate for Zach Robinson, and clearly he feels good about him coming in. And they're going to play Atlanta twice a year and Kevin Stefanski. So, Baker was always a guy early in his career where, he would get upset with media members when they would come after him, and he always had that chip on his shoulder, which he still does, but kind of would always protect himself. And rabbit ears, right? We talked about that with Wes Miller, how he was, at the radio interview after when he went viral, when he crashed out with Dan and Terry. And, Baker was kind of like that early in his career in Cleveland, where he would always get worked up about these stories or whatever, and he was just kind of out there too much. He was doing the State Farm commercials, which were great. But, it's just when you're doing all those commercials and you're making headlines like that and you're not winning a ton of games, it doesn't, that's usually not a good thing. And since, he's really stepped back and, he handles the media way better than he used to, when he was bouncing around from Carolina and Los Angeles and eventually here settled in Tampa. But that was some OG Baker Mayfield there clapping back on Twitter. So that'll be fascinating to watch that matchup unfold over the course of the next couple of years. 2 times a year, obviously, in the NFC South between the Atlanta Falcons, Kevin Stefanski in the Atlanta Falcons, and, of course, Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay. But overall, seems like Pitch is going to stay. He's going to entertain other play calling duties if they arise, which there's plenty of coordinator positions that are still being looked for here at this point. I don't believe he's in the running for Philadelphia. There hasn't been a connection there. Maybe that's a Matt Nagy landing spot. I know Declan Doyle, the OC for the Bears, is getting some interest there, but that would be a job, obviously, as Sirianni's an offensive guy, but he doesn't call the plays, and that'd be a job that pitcher might be interested in. But me personally, working in Philly, that's difficult, right? As loud as that is, the expectation level's so high, and, the coordinator is always under fire there because there's belief in what they do defensively with Fangio, and then the head coach kind of just oversees it, and everybody loves the GM and the owner, and the quarterback plays well in big moments, or at least he has before this year. I don't know. That's a job you necessarily would love to sign up for, to be the OC of the Philadelphia Eagles. But we'll see. We'll continue to have that damn pitcher situation monitored there as well. There was a press conference that went viral yesterday, and it was the Buffalo Bills press conference as Terry Pegula, their owner, and Beane, the GM, addressed the media, and it's become pretty obvious that situation in Buffalo is a mess. Complete mess. And if you're Sean McDermott, nobody really looks better than Sean McDermott right now, right? This guy's absolutely going to get another job. Maybe it's not this cycle. He'll get another opportunity, absolutely. And it's kind of looking like, he was dealing with a lot of nonsense there in Buffalo. And I'll hand up accountability here. I've backed Beane in the past. Hard for me to do that here today. My whole reasoning is that when you draft a guy out of Wyoming that didn't even win many games at Wyoming, right, and he turns out to be Josh Allen, that should give you some job security for a while. That was kind of my argument there. But you're hearing some of this stuff come out. And then, these owners, when they have these meetings, and these guys are smart guys. They're billionaires. All these owners in the NFL are billionaires. So maybe they're definitely not football experts, but they're not dumb guys, right? But some of these press conferences, they come off like dumb guys. And there's a reason why they're not in front of a microphone very often. And the Pegula thing was just a complete mess. How Beane, the GM's talking, and he cuts him off, and he's like, well, actually the Keon Coleman pick was a McDermott pick. It wasn't a Beane pick. Everyone drags Beane for the Keon Coleman pick, but that was a coaching staff pick. What are you doing? Keon Coleman is on your football team, right? Like, it's not like he's not on your team anymore. He just caught a touchdown pass the previous week in the playoffs, in the divisional round in Denver. Right, and you're just basically like, oh yeah, that thing blew up in our face. He's still here, but that wasn't Brandon's fault. That wasn't Beane's fault, right? That was the coaching staff that wanted him, right? And he continued to say things throughout that press conference where you're like, what are you talking about? And they asked him like when he made the decision to fire McDermott. And he's like, yeah, a couple minutes after the game. That you shouldn't make a brash decision like that. You're supposed to, sit here and be like, yeah, we thought it through. We thought through the pros and cons, and ultimately we came to this decision. But the fact he sat there and answered questions, I'm sitting there, and it's kind of theatrical, really, when you watch this happen. Because when these reporters, they see an opening, and you give them something like the thing on Keon Coleman, then they just start going in. And Beane kind of backtracked it a little bit, and there's been some clips that have surfaced on the internet about him backing Keon Coleman throughout the draft process. But it seems kind of like a zoo over there in Buffalo, and that's good for the Cincinnati Bengals because the Bengals, of course, is an organization that gets dragged through the mud, as we always say here on this show, but nobody's really talking about the Bengals right now, right? They did their thing. They brought Duke Tobin out there. He didn't say anything stupid. Right, he didn't give us a ton of answers, but he didn't say anything to go viral and have the national NFL media talking about him. He was just kind of ho-hum, diplomatic, political. Didn't get any great answers from him. He was doing it for an hour plus, but nobody in the NFL was really talking about it. The Bengals are just doing exactly what they like to do, flying under the radar, and now they're probably smiling in the Bengals building right now, seeing that the Bills just made a complete mess of this. And, that's going to be a factor as they bring in their new head coach. They have to nail this hire in Buffalo. This is, out of all the openings that are out there, this is by far the biggest decision that a team has to make. And you could argue Baltimore, but there's stability within the Ravens organization where it just feels like whoever they bring in, they'll be okay. Does that mean they'll win a Super Bowl? No, but they'll hang in there. It feels like you're teetering on the point of this thing in Buffalo completely blowing up in your face. And when you have a talent like Josh Allen, and I'd say Burrow's better, but like from a talent perspective, like that's the most talented guy, and Mahomes, of course, as well. But you cannot mess this up. And he's turning 30 years of age. You've got like a 4 or 5 year window with him at his prime. He says he wants to play, till he's 40 or whatever. But at some point, he's not going to look like the Josh Allen. He's going to have to win from within the pocket, and he's not going to be able to run as much. But you've got about 4 or 5 years here, maybe even 3 or 4 years here, where you've got to figure this thing out. And that means you have to hit this cycle, right? And at this point, Harbaugh's gone. Right, it doesn't seem like Tomlin has interest in being a head coach this year. Like, there's not great names out there, but this is huge for Buffalo, and they look terrible. And it looks like, and nobody looks better than McDermott right now for seemingly dealing with a clown show. And people always talk about, are the Bengals ruining Joe Burrow? Right, that's what people love saying. Well, now the conversation is, are the Buffalo Bills ruining Josh Allen? Because that's kind of what it feels like here at this point, right? Because it's just kind of a zoo. Right, I mean, the owners there talking like they can't put a microphone near him ever again. Right, he's not a football guy. He made his wealth on oil, which a lot of these guys did. Jerry Jones certainly, one of them as well. So again, he's not a dumb guy. He's a billionaire, right? But he doesn't know. Like, you don't do that in a press conference situation. Now everybody's talking about it, and the Bills look like clowns here at this point. And Sean McDermott's probably laughing, going, "Yeah, this is what I've been dealing with for." The past 9 years, just dysfunction. So I've backed being the GM for a while. I'm starting to get off that a little bit. My whole thing was just that, Josh Allen, Wyoming, you picked him. He didn't even win at Wyoming. Like, this is a pretty good pick. He turns out to be one of the best players ever. But they've got to get this thing figured out this offseason, and it all starts with this hire. I think the top name, I would say, to monitor is Daboll. By all accounts, has a good relationship with Josh Allen. He's the guy, if you remember several years ago, where Allen came into the league and it was like, okay, this guy can play, but he needs to iron out some stuff, right? He needs to be more accurate with the football. He needs to make some better decisions. He needs to be better late in games. And once Daboll kind of got into the mix, that's what brought the best out of Josh Allen. So I think there's a natural intrigue there for him to be the next head coach. I don't think promoting Joe Brady to head coach does much for Buffalo in this spot, but I would imagine Daboll's kind of the front runner here, but they have to get this hire right. They absolutely do. And it's going to get pretty bad for him, honestly, if they don't, because they have such a great player here in Josh Allen, and it looks like they're wasting him a little bit here. But the Bengals are laughing in the building right now. It's kind of a sigh of relief in there where it's like, okay, people aren't talking about us and Joe Burrow and, all the issues we have. All the attention's going to, how the Bills are ruining Josh Allen, which is good for the Cincinnati Bengals. They love flying below the radar, so this went exactly as they hoped. But credit to them for, executing the Tobin press conference and Zach Taylor executing his end-of-the-year press conferences as well. So no real need for the national media to really get involved with what Cincinnati's doing. So it's just ho-hum, more of the same. And, we'll continue to talk about the draft and free agency and see if they can't get this thing back on the right track. All right, Jeff Hafley has taken the Dolphins job, and I've been meaning to talk about this for a couple of days now. I've always been a Hafley guy. You heard stuff about him years ago when he was a DB's coach for the 49ers, and you heard stuff about, this guy is a stud up-and-coming coach. And soon after that, he's the DC at Ohio State. I believe he was only there for a year, and it was like a co-defensive coordinator situation. Urban did that a lot with some of his coordinators and assistants, but had a great year there, and then eventually ends up taking the head job at Boston College. And when you look at Boston College, it doesn't really get more difficult than Boston College. Like at a Division I level, it is hard to win there in Boston College. And Bill O'Brien, say what you want about Bill O'Brien, but the guy clearly can coach, right? Taking some of those Texans teams with suspect quarterback play to the playoffs and winning playoff games, and of course beating the Bengals, and what he was able to accomplish in New England with Brady. Like, the guy can coach, and they won like 2 games this year, right, in the worst conference in the ACC. So that Boston College job is not an easy place to win. And he had some success there winning some games. He was not fired by Boston College. He decided to leave. And, he made the decision to leave the Boston College job, which was a tough job, but paying him millions of dollars, and go be a coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And I thought initially when he made it, I was like, I get this. Like, I think it's a good move by Hafley to do this, but you have to understand as a coach how difficult of a move that is, because when you're at Boston College, you have all of these guys on your staff and all these players that you recruited that are there because of you, right? You had guys that when they moved, wherever they were at, to move and be with Jeff Hafley, to be up in Boston College and be his coach, and then he's going to sit down and be like, yeah, sorry guys, I'm leaving, right? I'm not going. It's not like he's leaving to take another college job where he brings a lot of his assistants with him. He's going to Green Bay by himself, right? There was no other Boston College guys that went to Green Bay. And, credit to him, because it's not like he went to it's not like he went to Cleveland, right? It's not like he went to Tennessee. It was an organization that hadn't played very good defense, mind you. And think about those Aaron Rodgers teams. People love saying, oh, Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, he was never quite good enough, right, throughout his prime. He didn't really have great defenses. They really struggled defensively. Even, the LaFleur years early when he's, winning back-to-back MVPs, and the McCarthy years, great offenses, they struggled on the defensive side of the ball. So he saw an opportunity with a great organization and said, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. This thing could blow up in my face. The job security in the NFL, talk about how bad the job security is in football in general, but you got more job security at Boston College than you do as a coordinator in the NFL. And if you're Boston College, you can go 6-6 for a while, and everyone's like, yeah, we're going to a bowl game. That's pretty sweet, right? As long as you don't just completely go belly up, you're in a spot where you're going to have that job for a while and make millions of dollars. Whereas you go to Green Bay and you have a bad defense for 1 year, you might be gone. But he bet on himself, and, he certainly got some help with them trading for Micah, but they had success defensively the previous year without Micah. Clearly can develop guys, and, they didn't bring in a ton of new pieces. He just developed them and got them in a position where they were playing competent football. And the years of Jordan Love, winning some playoff games, a lot of that was due to the Packers defense and how they were able to rise to the occasion in big-time moments for them in the postseason. Right? I don't think a lot of us talk about Jordan Love the way we do had he not had some of those playoff wins. Played really good defense there. And Jeff Hafley saw the opportunity, and now he gets to be a head coach in the National Football League. So there was never going to be a world where, he was going to have enough success at Boston College where he could get the Florida job or the LSU job. Like, that wasn't going to happen. And he understood the climate of college football, where things were at with the NIL and the transfer portal, and he was like, you know what, get me out of this. Am I going to tick off a lot of people? Am I going to tick off my players? Am I going to break the hearts of my staff? Is it going to be difficult? Yeah. I'm going to go bet on myself. Try to be a coordinator in the NFL, and if I have success there, I will be a top-of-the-line head coaching candidate. And that is exactly how things played out for Jeff Hafley. So he was a sought-after guy. I give the Dolphins a lot of credit because things were looking a little bit hairy there, I thought, for Miami. When they made the decision late to fire McDaniel, where he felt like he was going to be the head coach, and then all of a sudden he gets kind of stabbed in the back a little bit by the Dolphins, and they ended up moving off of him a little bit later than some other teams had, other teams that, of course, didn't make the playoffs. And, they were in a spot where I felt like it kind of felt like Harbaugh or Tomlin or bust. And, Harbaugh takes the Giants job. Seems like Tomlin doesn't want to take a job. And then they get Halfley, which I think is the next best thing. I really do. So he's got a heck of a lot of work to do. He pairs with John Eric Sullivan, who was a Green Bay guy, is now the new GM in Miami. So it kind of made sense when they made, the decision to go forth with the GM. Like, it felt like Halfley was a good chance he was going to be the head coach. And he's got to figure out his offense coordinator. They got a ton of work to do in Miami. It's not like you're taking the Giants job, right? Like, you'd much rather have the Giants job than the Dolphins job. There's a lot of pieces in place, whereas this offseason for Miami is huge. The draft, obviously, is huge, and they got to figure out the quarterback position. You heard John Eric Sullivan, their GM, kind of talking about some of the different pieces he liked, and he mentioned Achane and Jalen Waddle and these guys like that, some guys on the defensive side of the ball as well. Didn't say Tua, and I don't blame him. They got to figure out what to do there at that position. And he's a defensive guy, so he needs a brilliant OC to come in. But I expect him to have some success. If the Dolphins can stick with him for a little bit and kind of give him as long at least as they gave McDaniel, I think he's in a spot to turn this around. And I think, you just hear him talk. He's a bright guy, right? He really is a bright guy. He's a football guy. And like I said, when he was starting out in San Francisco as a DB's coach, you kind of saw stardom, and you heard kind of people talk about that as well. And then he's at Ohio State, Boston College, Green Bay, boom, he's the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So credit to him for betting on himself. A lot of people shook their head, rolled their eyes, scratched their head when he made that decision to leave to be a coordinator. He made that call, and it ended up being the right one for him. All right, a little bit of Reds conversation to end the show here on a Thursday. Lots of ways we can go. Tito, by the way, was at the game last night, and I actually forgot that he was an Arizona alum. So I'm seeing seeing Tito sit front row, and he's repping the Wildcats. I'm like, come on, Tito, that's the wrong cat. It's got to be the Bearcats. But he went to Arizona, of course. Apparently he's a huge Arizona fan there as well. But he's out there getting ready for spring training. That was good to see. And we'll see what the Reds do here going forward. We talked about, or at least I was frustrated that they couldn't throw around some prospects and get Luis Robert on the team for the Reds. I understand there's not a lot of guarantees there. I understand you look at his numbers the past few years and you go, why are you excited about that? It's kind of a ceiling thing, right? So that's what the Reds do. They bank on these guys with high ceilings and roll the dice and see what happens. We had Gordon Whitmire and others come on and say the Reds were interested. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like I follow all these prospects and know who exactly. I know the one guy that the Mets gave up actually played for them a little bit in the big leagues, but maybe they were asking for like a Rhett Lauder or somebody, and there wasn't a prospect the Reds were willing to give up, or maybe it was just all smoke and they never actually had any interest in bringing in Luis Robert, which would be a huge mistake if that were the case. But then you where do you go from here? Bellinger was never coming. I talked about how that would be fun, and it would be. He's going back to New York, but you look at these bats, and it's like Miguel Andujar. And we were joking about that. Like right after the Reds lost in the playoffs, where it's like, something tells me, we're sitting here talking about getting a bat or whatever. It kind of feels like our free agent signing offensively is going to be Miguel Andujar. We were laughing about it, and here we are. It kind of seems like that might be the case, which is disappointing in the sense that they didn't go get someone else. Again, this isn't a done deal. Maybe they're not going to bring him back, but I wouldn't have any issues with that. I thought Miguel Andujar was awesome, and to be honest with you, I didn't think Tito utilized him appropriately down the stretch, and that would be kind of my biggest gripe on Tito. Apart from the fact he religiously puts TJ Friedel at the number one spot, but it was like at the end, put Andujar out there. He was getting some hits. I understand he's just, really only out there to face lefties, but you had guys in the lineup struggling. Put him out there against righties. He had some success against right-handed hitters there as well. So I'd be open to bringing him back. He's got some pop in his bat, and he possessed that clutch gene a little bit as well, which goes a long way. Which, Ellie, who we all love, or a lot of us should love, believe he can be a great player. He hasn't really been that late inning guy, 2-out guy, guys on base guy offensively, and you have that in Andujar. And, of course, you have that in Spencer Steer as well, and I think that does go a long way. So, if you can get him on a team-friendly thing, he's had a deal. He's had the continuity with the team. He was here through the stretch. I think he felt valued here on this team. And, to have some of the pop he had off the bench, I've talked about this a lot on the show. In Major League Baseball, coming off the bench and having success as a pinch hitter, to me, it's really hard to wrap my head around. Because, you're sitting there cold all game, and then, boom, here's a guy throwing 100 miles an hour, and you've just been sitting there all game, and you're expected to hit him. I thought Andujar did a great job in the position in which he had. Defensively, you certainly have some questions. But at this point, yeah, bring him back. Bring him back if you're the Cincinnati Reds. Nick Kirby, Craig Sandlin were kind of talking about what to do at that number 2 spot in the lineup. You know, it's a fun time of year. We can sit here and do all the projections of the lineup and whatever. And, you know, most teams, they're switching it all the time. The Reds actually are, you know, there's usually some guys that aren't really moving much around in the lineup. And Tito has come out and has said it's going to be, you know, pretty similar with how they approach things. Friedel's going to lead off. I don't get it. None of our guys here at Chatterbox get it. You want to have your best hitters up the most. Like, that should be obvious, right? There shouldn't be some analytic or some baseball weird stat that you have to use to come up with that conclusion. No, I want my best hitter to hit the most, right? And maybe you say, well, he's not your best hitter. Well, the hope is that he's your best hitter, right? Elly De La Cruz at 1 to me would be great. Now, there's been some rumblings that he doesn't want to bat 1. I find that hard to believe. Elly De La Cruz is a ball player. He loves playing baseball, and he'll do whatever he asks. Plays with a lot of joy. We've talked about that. I think Elly at 1 at the leadoff spot would be great. And then you get him on base, and that's pressure for the opposition right out of the gate, right? And you'd have situations with Friedel leading off against a lefty, and he really struggled there in that spot. He's not a platoon guy. He obviously can hit lefties and righties, but it was not good against lefties, certainly recently for TJ Friedel. So apparently he's going to stay there, and they're going to work Elly into the 3 spot. And then what do you do at number 2? And, you know, this is a conclusion that we've came to a lot here, which is frustrating. But you look at it and you go, well, our 2 best guys for a 2-hitter are Matt McClain and Sal Stewart. And I'm excited about Sal Stewart. Apparently he's lost a lot of weight, like 20-plus pounds, I think, which hopefully that just means he's lost some fat and he's a little bit more agile, but he still has the power, right? Because if he doesn't still have the power, that would be a problem for the Reds. But I think he's a guy that fits that mold. We had Chris Welsh on the show, and the expectation level for Sal Stewart is through the roof. Like, they need him to be like I don't think it'd be hyperbolic to say they need him to be the best hitter, which maybe it's like top 3, but they need him to be a dude offensively. And just the nature of the game, like, it happens for all players, but especially young players. This guy's played a couple of weeks. He's had a cup of coffee in the big leagues, and the expectations he's going to come in and anchor this lineup and be at number 2 and drive in all these runs and hit bombs. He's going to have some success, but there's going to be some really low points offensively and probably defensively because he struggled in the field for Sal Stewart this year, and that's what's kind of scary, right? And that's why you would hope that you would have a veteran in there that could kind of pick up some of that slack. But if they're in a spot where Sal Stewart is slumping for elongated periods of time and Matt McClain doesn't show improvement and doesn't get back to rookie Matt McClain, you're in a world of trouble because one of those 2 guys is going to be a top-of-the-order guy. And it's just kind of how it feels at this point. You're going to have Friedel 1. It's like Diego McClain or Stewart at 2, right? And then probably Elly at 3, and then probably Steer at 4, who we love Steer. I love Steer. But is he your typical cleanup bat in Major League Baseball? No, he's not. And then you're going to have platoon guys and, you know, Stevenson and Trevino, guys like that throughout the rest of your lineup. So it'll be fascinating to see what they do at that spot. You know, I think a lot of us have a lot of anxiety because we're like, you know, we're holding on to so much success. So much of this team's future success is dependent on Sal Stewart being really good right now and Matt McClain getting back to previous forms, which is kind of reminiscent of the Bengals in a lot of ways, right? Where it's like, okay, we need Shamar Stewart to be really good right now. Didn't happen, right? Maybe Shamar can be good. I got a lot more confidence in Sal Stewart than I do in Shamar Stewart for what it's worth, right? And then a guy like B.J. Hill, where it's like, well, we need him, we're paying him, and we need him to get back to where he was in 21. Kind of how it feels with McClain, right? We need him to get back to where he was in previous years. And ultimately, we'll have to cross our fingers and hope that can happen. But I don't know if they're going to add another bat. We have people come on the show and reporters out there that say they're trying to. What are you waiting on here at this point? We know they're not going to pay big money for a guy, but like at this point, like just bring back Andujar so you don't lose him. Like bring back somebody and kind of go from there. But it seems like it's status quo here in Cincinnati. And unfortunately, that's kind of the reality of where we're at for our professional teams with the Cincinnati Bengals and, of course, the Cincinnati Reds. Just kind of running it back and hoping things can work out better for this team going forward. There's a lot of potential. You got Tito calling the shots. They got great pitching. They've revitalized that bullpen, certainly, and we'll see ultimately if that can result in some success for the Reds. But the 2 guys, the guy that you got for the trade and Dane Myers and the guy that you picked up, and J.J. Bleday. It seems like they're going to be platooning for one another. Maybe Dane Myers will take some center field time away from T.J. Friedel. But you're in a spot with those guys where you need one of those guys to be a hit, right? And, they've struggled throughout their big league career to this point. They've shown some upside, but are you going to be able to tap into J.J. Bleday and who he was as a player throughout the past couple of years, or like from like 2-3 years ago, or is he going to be the guy that you got last year, right? So typical Reds, some guys with some high ceilings, but we're all sitting here and waiting. And there's no guarantees with this team. We certainly know that, and that'll be fascinating to watch as we progress here throughout certainly spring training and into the season. My biggest thing is, just get out of spring training without one of your top guys getting hurt. Because every year it's like, oh, yeah, he's out for a few weeks. He's going to miss the first few months of the season. Or Steer, he's only going to have 5 at-bats in spring training, and then we're going to stick him in the lineup right away, and he's going to not get any hits, and we're going to keep playing him. I hope that doesn't happen for the Reds going into this season. But appreciate everyone as always. We'll be back here tomorrow on the show. We'll have some more Bengals conversations. We'll go through a list of free agents. I think we'll do that because, again, the Bengals are going to make some moves in free agency. They absolutely will. And I thought, the Perine move in free agency was great. That was a tremendous move for Cincinnati. I think the Slayton move could have had more upside had you surrounded him with some better players. That ultimately didn't work out. By the way, are you going to cut him or are you going to keep him? That will be a fascinating offseason topic there as well. And, from a free agent perspective, beyond that, this year, what positions are you going to be looking to address? You would think defensive tackle is going to be a spot that Cincinnati looks at. But the reason why I'm a little bit concerned there is because it's going to be a lot of TJ Slaytons, right? That are available and guys that are within your budget that you're going to go get. The Bengals do have a lot of cap space. They can spend some money here. We'll see if ultimately they choose to do so or not. But knowing the Cincinnati Bengals and how they operate as a team, it kind of feels like they'll be comparing these players in free agency he's kind of like TJ Slayton. Well, we'll just keep TJ Slayton for the continuity's sake, right? The collaboration's sake, which obviously would not be a good situation at all for the Cincinnati Bengals. But looking forward to talking that free agency, draft stuff that will continue to be a topic of conversation for us here at the show. But appreciate everyone as always. Again, help us out with the podcast. Leave a 5-star review, and we'll have you covered here all off season long and into spring training for the Cincinnati Reds. Certainly looking forward to that. Appreciate everyone as always. And until tomorrow, take care, everybody.